Hello, guys. David Vose here. Another beautiful day here in paradise. Clear skies. Got cold last night, though. I think about the coldest it's been. I think it got down around 13 degrees. Got up this morning and, right away I got up to about 21. And I was like, oh, this is still below freezing. But it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. But, it doesn't feel that cold here. I don't know. The sun beats down on you and warms you up, even though it's definitely cold, but you kind of face the sun. As soon as the sun peers over the horizon and you see it over the mountains, and you get a direct line to that sun, boom, you just warm up, which I think is a good example. Because what's actually happening? I wanted to talk to you guys today about a couple of things. We did that video yesterday and at the end we talked about the moon, how I showed you the evidence that it's just a flat disk. But then I gave you my explanation that wasn't true, that it is not a flat disk, but it's actually a round ball, which you can see when there's a crescent moon. You can see the shadows. So it is a round sphere. You can definitely see that. But it's odd that it's always facing in the same side's always facing us. And I said that might indicate that maybe it's just this fixed spotlight up there. But of course, if it was a light, a source of light, it would be always a full moon, wouldn't it? But because it waxes and wanes and we see the curvature, then that little concept that guy I heard, I don't know who was talking about it, was on somewhere, little shorts of somewhere. And he was saying that proves that the Earth or the moon is a disk, because when you see a full moon, there's no shadows. Now, I don't know how accurate, because I haven't actually done the experiment myself. I mean, he said if you put a basketball or a ball or whatever in a dark room, shine a flashlight on it, it's going to have shadows darker and darker as you get to the outer circumference. And I was thinking, well, I don't know about that. I mean, yes, there would be the light would be refracting on the edges at a different angle, and it wouldn't be as bright, possibly. But then again, we don't know, because a flashlight is a focused beam, and the sun is shining in all directions all around, not just as a spotlight. It's kind of a diffused light, and I'm not sure about all of that. I do think, though, that if you were looking directly at the moon, and we know that the sun's big, but it's 93 million miles away, so that's like a light in the distance. Not a spotlight, but a diffused light. I don't know, maybe like light in all directions, like a LED. Just kind of lights up the room. But one thing that does also come to mind, like last night when we were looking at the moon, I might show a picture here. I'll probably cut this out and put a picture in here of that moon that we saw. It was so bright, it didn't really look like a reflection. I mean, we think it's a reflection because we were told that it's not a source of light, that the sun is shining and reflecting off of it. Well, I find this logic to contradict that. They say that Venus is so bright, it's brighter than Mars, and they're about the same distance and same size or whatever, about. But Venus is a lot brighter in the sky. You can barely find Mars, but Venus is always shining. It's so bright, almost like unbelievable. Venus is the brightest star in the sky, brightest object in the sky. But they're about the same distance. Mars being further out, away from the sun, and Venus being further in toward the sun. But they say the reason why that Venus is so much brighter and bigger is because it's got this gaseous surface, maybe even liquid kind of. There are some theories that there was liquid and then gases around it, but it's very luminous, they say. But whereas the moon, they're telling, is just a desert, which might absorb light. Well, first off, the moon doesn't seem to be absorbing a whole lot of light then, does it? Pretty darn bright. Like I said, I'll show a picture. It's so bright, it just looks like it's a source of light. No, it doesn't blind you like when you look at the sun. I mean, you cannot look into the sun. It'll blind your eyes. That light is at some ultra vibration that, woo, will just burn your eye. I mean, it's fire. You can look directly at the moon. Another thing is when the sun's out, it brightens the entire world. I mean, so bright. But when the moon is out, it's a very dull light. You can, better than pitch black. When you have a nice full moon, you can still find your way around. But it's a very soft light. So we say, oh, well, that's because it's a reflection. And the proof that it's a reflection is that it waxes and wanes, and we can see that the sun is coming at it from another angle. That must mean that it's reflecting the light. Well, I believe it is a source of light. Why would, if it was a spotlight or a source, a diffuse spotlight, dull burning light, a lamp, why would it wax and wane? Well, because the light can shine only where it is positively charged. Now, that seems odd because we're looking at a surface that is connected to the other side, right? It's one big round ball. So we think, well, wait a minute. If it's on, it's on. The whole thing would be on. It had to be full moon all the time. How does it just light up one side? Because, remember, there's a positive and a negative pole at every planet. So there's a pulling and a pushing. Both cause a certain vibratory frequency. One is a very bright light. One is a very glowing, but maybe hotter, but less bright. Like an element in a stove that makes heat, but a different fine, very, very fine element inside of a glass bulb makes a very bright light. It depends on the vibration as to whether the light's going to be blue or red. And it could very well be, and I do believe, that the sun is only bright on its positive side. And if we were to believe that, and it's the backside of the sun, we never see it, and it was like a black hole or the other side, where, like you see the moon has a dark side. If it were that way, wouldn't we then see waxing and waning of the sun? Well, even then, I don't know that we could even tell very well with our own eyes, because you can't look into it. But if it were different than the Earth and the moon in the sense that the moon is a satellite to the Earth and therefore always faces the Earth, like in this obedient, like a satellite around the Earth, not around the sun, it's around the Earth, then maybe the Earth does the same thing, or the sun, vice versa, because we're a satellite of the sun. The Earth isn't going around the moon or Venus or other planets, going around the sun. We can establish that. And then if we were always facing, and there's another proof that we are facing the sun all the time when we're going around. How could we be doing that if we're spinning, right? Maybe the Earth isn't spinning. But if we were going around, there would be a centrifugal force. Like you hold a bucket, hold the handle of the bucket, put water in, okay? And then start swinging the bucket around, and you note that all the water is now hugging the bottom of the pail as you're swinging it around. We call that centrifugal force. So the weight wants to go to the circumference. That at first might explain why things are spherical, because we're saying the thing is spinning And so it would be throwing things into orbit, except for what about the poles? I mean, there's still a sky above the poles. There's a lot of things that we're not understanding. It's too really complicated to even think about. But there's more than the spin. You've also got the rotation around the sun. We're moving very fast. And the sun itself is spinning. And the galaxy is spinning. So there's so many different forces infinitely there that maybe some have thought that's why there is a center and everything is falling towards little centers. If you open a barn door when it's just got morning and the sun is starting to shine, you'll see a beam of light going into the barn. And as you open it, the air is just like sucked out and there's all these little whirlwinds of dust. And if you look into the beam of that ray of light coming into the barn, you'll see the dust swirling and you'll notice that it does exactly what the galaxy does. There are all these little vortices, little particles floating around each other in little swirling, like the galaxy, these little vortices. And we see that with hurricanes. The hurricanes are these vortices that suck stuff up through the middle and push it out at the top. But it's this big, huge vortex. It looks just like a galaxy. And then it throws off from itself smaller vortices we call tornadoes. And they throw off twisters or smaller tornadoes. And this goes on. And this seems to be the model for the universe. All these little vortices. But when you see a vortex, it doesn't necessarily, that vortex that we see doesn't necessarily create a ball. Although, remember Dorothy and her little dog Toto too? Well, when they went up into the hurricane, there was this place in the center where it was just all calm. And things were just kind of floating around, It was kind of still, but a little floaty. But if you're out at sometimes we have these hurricanes and they say, oh, it's 55 miles an hour winds. But towards the center. But if you go on the outside of the peripheral of the storm, the winds reach 100 miles an hour or something. And then right in the center there's the eye of the storm, the calm. Now that might be why the center is special and everything's being pulled into the center. But doesn't even seem like, I guess it's like everything's being pulled from the bottom in and then it gets trapped in there. But then you would think that would mean that there'd only be gravity on the earth on the bottom side. Why is it all the way around? Well, these are all these, we could keep bringing up different laws, different forces. Gravity, we don't really know what it is, combination of different things. It really, in my mind, you got to get rid of all these physical laws or Newtonian physics and realize that it's all an illusion. And your mind is the source and it images all these things. And our mind is not just one thing. It's a higher will, the will or the thinker. And then we have the observer, the analyst. And they're working, we call that the higher mind and the lower consciousness. They're two different awarenesses or places of yourself. It's the self that you're focusing on at the moment, the little avatar, or your higher divine self, which is really, in a sense, the whole. And you're the little avatar, and all you are is the feminine. The whole avatar, which isn't the physical. It's just the will, the invisible, the mind, or the higher mind. You got these two we call male and female. The conscious mind and the higher consciousness. Male and female, negative and positive. We can understand what these two forces do when we bring cold and heat together. It makes a low pressure and a high pressure, and it creates the spin, which is the vortex. Well, in that setting, we're talking about water, H2O, gases, and dust, and all these things are swirling. And so the two main factors in that is heat and cold. We call it that. let's just be honest, cold and heat is no different. They're just, all it is a vibrationatory level change. So in colors, you have vibration levels. You have red, the hot, and blue, the cold. But it's not really cold or hot. It's just a likeness. It does the same thing. The red acts, in color, the red acts like the heat by being the positive in that duality, and the blue being the opposite of the red. And in the middle, you have the yellow. Now, you might ask yourself, why is there 3 there? Everything's divided into 2, right, to start with. And there are 3 basic colors. Why isn't there 2? Well, there is 2. There's black and white. But you've probably heard that white is all the colors. Well, there's only 3. In white is the 3 colors, red, blue, and yellow. And blue and yellow make green, and red and yellow make orange, and all the other colors. But it starts, you can break it down to 3, and then you can break it down to 2, because ultimately, you're breaking it down to 1. It's all in the white. And the black is, there is no color. It's a void of color. So we start with 1, we go to 2, and then we go with 3. So when we say 3 colors, we're just talking about vibrations when it's reached another level, from the 1 to the 2, and then to the 3, and then it goes to the 7, and then on and on. We've got 10, we've got 12, we've got all these different layers and levels. The circle, the square, the triangle, the ogdod, the ennead, and all the rest. So we can make these models, and we come to some kind of determination that it really is negative and positive. We can break it down to male and female, up and down. We really go deep. I always go up and down, left and right. Just 2 opposites. And the only reason that they make each other spin is because there is no 2. It's just the whole. But as a concept, we cut it in half. And once we conceive of things, that's what we're doing. Dissecting, cutting in half. Separating, meaning this is this and this is the other. Well, it's all one. So we make some distinction. Okay, well, this part of the 1 is on the left side. And this part of the 1's on the right side. They're equal. They're the same, but it's just to distinguish what is the same, so that we can even see one part of it. We've got to analyze one part. We've got to forget about the other part for a second. Separate them. So we've got a whole pile of nuts. We don't know how many there is. The only way to find out is to start separating them. We might be able to distinguish each and every one. It's the only way to understand this isn't by Newtonian mathematics either. It isn't by scribbles on a page. It's really in your own mind. You got to understand it. I am not someone who's gone to higher learning, and I never went past the 6th grade. Actually, I didn't go to 6th grade. Like, went 2 months of it, barely. I don't even know what 6th grade is. I mean, I only passed 5th grade. I have a GED only because I needed to go and take a test, and I did, and I got to pass that. So I got my little GED somewhere. But, so I don't know how to, on paper, I saw a physicist one time do a math problem. I don't know what kind of math it was, but it was all these marks and numbers and lines and squiggly marks. It covered the entire chalkboard, the whole wall. And I thought, what are you going to do with that? What kind of a problem is that? I don't even know what kind of a problem this was, but so whatever. And the way that you solved it was you kept, like, positive and negative. They ruled each other out. You could work your way to the smaller problem by crossing out this that negates that, and this negates that. So we're trying to find how many women there are in a crowd of men. You could not understand by just looking at the crowd. You'd have to separate the men from the women. But anyway, this logic goes in all different directions, what I'm saying. And it's too much for the human mind to put all this and carry the 1 and bring down the 3 and add the, remainder. But we're talking about big, big problems, and you have to have different way of math. My way of understanding this is through my own conscious vision, perception. I have my own little math. I have an opening to this place where I know things. And it is, I believe, a channel that the angels communicate. I think they do with all of us. I also believe we can open up channels to the devil, people who indulge in lower carnal pleasures and, to the extreme, and who, they, as you say, the Bible says you entertain angels. So when somebody comes to your door, make sure you're polite and be hospitable, because you may be entertaining an angel. We don't know where these angels are coming from or who they're going to be talking through. But you need to be able to discern which of these are good spirits and which are bad spirits. We have to be discerning of spirits. And that's the gift of discernment. And you can entertain devils as well, and they may come in any form. So I'm looking at this from a more mental, philosophical way, and my conclusions can be verified then later on by math. But I see these different laws not because the ones that I believe and take very seriously are the ones that I can see in my own mind. I understand centrifugal force. I've seen it. I understand. And if you've got all different gyros going on, things being swung in different directions, there's got to be something we call equilibrium. So if the universe is all moving in different directions and like marbles being just thrown any willy-nilly way and busting and banging into each other, it seems like it's just kind of chaotic. But it isn't so chaotic, because the marble will go in the direction of the angle of the hit. So there is some predictability. There's a rule. There's, throwing the big steely into the pile of marbles, and it breaks it open. And the marbles shooting everywhere, like billiards on a pool table. You might say it's random. You just push the cue ball into the cued balls, and they go flying in random directions. But it's not random, because you can win the game by knowing the angle to hit. And there's several angles, or many angles. Now, the universe is infinite, so there's an infinite number of angles. The marbles are infinite, and they're banging and clashing and coming. And so maybe ultimately the universe is just chaos. Only in the sense that it is what it is. It just is what exists, and it exists by virtue of itself. There is no law. Maybe that's chaos. Law is order, right? There's some guy on the order down here. But no, it's just chaos. Well, chaos itself has some order. We don't know who made the initial boom, bump, bang. No one did. It's infinite. Why? Because when you narrow it all down, negative, positive, it all gets back to reality and non-reality. And that means that the only two things that exist is something and nothing. If both are just concepts, then nothing exists? No, there's still something. We just said that. Yeah, but something's just a concept. Okay, who's the conceiver? The conceiver's the whole, but the conceiver's got to have two concepts. And both the concept that he conceives and that which he cannot conceive is part of his being, which is neither conceiving or non-conceiving. They're just the negative and the positive, the unreality. In reality, there's just the whole, the Virgin Mother. We call her that. Sometimes we call her the Heavenly Father. In different contexts, we always find, like in Egypt, they say, oh, Ra's the greatest, he's the divine father. Well, no, it's actually Atum. Huh? And then we find out that, well, Atum and Ra are two sides of the same being, the physical and the spiritual. And on top of that, there's another temple over here that will tell you that Asenath, or they call her Neat, was actually the creator of Ra and Atum. Yeah. And how could that be? Well, it's kind of like saying the mind creates the image, but now you're going to find out who created the mind, and that is experience, learning. And who did that? Well, I don't know. Remember that movie Conan the Barbarian? Remember they were sitting around the fire one day, all these cavemen and, our ancestors or something, and they were arguing about whose god was the greatest. Somebody had the god of fire that could burn up their god of fertility or whatever, and somebody else had the god of, it was almost like rock, scissors, paper. It just went around and around and around. You couldn't find who the head honcho was around here. I guess a little bit like the Apostle Paul, who says that a woman is out of the man because Adam was formed first. But then he says, but in Christ, neither is the man without the woman, nor the woman without the man, because all men come from the womb of the woman. Which one is it? Come on, guys. Oh, well, there were different schools of thought. No. Oh, I guarantee there wasn't no different. It's just that in certain ages, they concentrated on one aspect of the divine family. Our Heavenly Father's the ruler of all that is good. But he's got a counterpart, the devil. Who's the devil, Dave? How could our Father be almighty with this devil down here breathing down his neck? He's got half the universe. Because the other half is nothing. He always loses. If he loses, then we're all going to be forever happy. Nothing bad would ever happen. We'd be all sitting on our cloud having our pina coladas and young maidens running around dancing for us, cooking for us, waving palm branches so we don't get hot. But wait a minute. Who's going to do all this? The slaves? Well, then there's no way for anything to turn around. There's got to be both. Oh, maybe everybody gets their own turn at the high seat. Maybe it's just as fun to have the low seat sometimes. I don't know. But the universe has got to be a whole. And ultimately, it's all. And therefore, it's the male and the female. Or no, it's neither. Because those are just variables of the one. There's only the one. And I believe that's why Jesus said, I and the Father are one. And ye are one with me, and you are one with us. And we're all one together. And I am you, and you are me. If you see this little child, and you give him a cup of water, you're giving it unto me. Because you and I are the same person. You're just another space, another time. You're me in another space, in another time. And all the variables are just me, the one. But we're going to look at it a little differently. The only thing then that's spinning is your mind. Nothing really spins. There's just one thing. And the one thing is the thinker. And the one thinker, he's also the imaginer, the will. He just does what he wants. All things are possible to this one. Why? Because there's nothing. Right? Just as well as all is nothing. They're all the same. So, if you say, well, how could the universe exist? What if it doesn't? I see it, therefore I am. Okay, well, it does exist. Well, okay, then it must have come from something. What do you believe it came from? Who's the creator? Who created the creator? There's no way to get around this. It just is, by virtue of itself. But the fact that you asked the question, what if it didn't? If that's what's gotten your goat, not if that's what's keeping you up at nights, well, I know I'm here, but what if I didn't? What if I wasn't? I'm happy, but what if I wasn't? I'm full, but what if I was starving? I'm at rest, but what if I was in a constant motion? Well, those are just thoughts. You're none of those things. That's not what we are. We're not those things moving around and bumping against each other. Those are non-things. Those are concepts. What we are is being. And being isn't the thing, is it? Or is it? Is being only half of the equation? And then you have to be something, right? Being's not something, it's the force behind the something. However, if being's constantly doing something, then being's one with the something. So you're one with the outer, and the outer is one with the inner. Isn't that true? So, okay, we're getting off into another philosophical discussion, but back to the moon and whether it's a source of light or the earth, whether it's always facing the sun, and perhaps the sun is a disk as well. And then therefore, if we could prove that the sun was a disk and the moon was a disk, and maybe the earth is a disk. Well, let me show you my observations. Obviously, I've never gone way up in the sky and got there and looked at the earth and said, oh yeah, it's a sphere. I can tell that from here. I know people have gone up into airplanes and they've been able to see the curvature. I know all the arguments that please don't tell me in the discussion board, oh Dave, but water always finds its level. I don't want to talk about that. Because that's not even true. Water doesn't always find its level. That's ridiculous. Water is pliable and will be pushed wherever it is pushed, or held wherever it is held by a force, like a balloon. Put water in it, and on equal side, the force is applied, and it becomes a round balloon, right? And if there is gravity, if you believe that, and there's some force that's pushing all around, then obviously the water would conform to the sphere, just as the flowers in the grass conforms to the shape of the earth. Now, the question then is there some kind of force pushing on all sides to make this sphere? Well, we just said there are all these gyroscope motions. Only one of them we noticed that we can imagine with our mind so far, we've noticed the bucket that we swing around and around. We've seen it with our eyes, how the force of the water is pushed away from us. And we can see that centrifugal force. But now, what if we had another arm swinging another bucket in the other direction? Well, now it's going to do the same thing, centrifugal force. However, the water in one bucket is being pushed one way, and the water in the other bucket is being pushed the other way. And yet both of them are in my hands and all connected to my rib cage and to this body in the center. And they're rotating and gyroscoping around the center. And yet the substance is being pushed out. Well, now, again, why aren't they being pushed in? If in the center of the earth is uranium and it's all the heavy stuff, and gravity pushes in, then why is it that, and it's spinning and rotating and all these forces, shouldn't everything be wanting to go out? Then in the universe, everything would be pushed out from wherever the center is. Wait a minute, there is no center. It's infinite. This is all happening. This is why you got little vortices going everywhere, bumping into each other. And for some reason, they don't get swallowed up into each other's selves. Unless they're a negative force, they'll go to a positive force. What does that mean? A bigger vortice can absorb a smaller vortice, but not vice versa or the other way around. You could look at it that way. We've just looking at these things too complicated. So everything's being flung from the center, but there is no center. So therefore, we're not really being flung from the center. Not in the universe. It's just being flung around everywhere. And the hot and the cold, whenever they get near each other, start doing the dance and throwing off other vortices that are smaller in the wake of their vortice. Because these two, the mom and the dad, are creating a sphere, a negative and a positive. And because they're getting near each other, they're creating a huge force. And they're flinging this huge force, but the force weakens after a certain point. because there's only so much charge. So the sun is a much greater force. It's a bigger charge. And the moon's going to obey it, and the earth's going to obey that. And so imagine if each of these little vortices, we give them a particular charge. Like we'll say, oh, this one's only 3 volts, and that one's 100 volts. Well, that one's bright. You could not even look into that one. But this little 3-volt one, just a little dim night light. It's like a little moon. That's all. It's just a lower wattage or something. So then, okay, you say, well, you have this little lower wattage moon that seems to be rotating and being controlled by the little higher wattage Earth, or voltage, or whatever, the vortice power. And the Earth is got about enough vortice power to somehow be attracted, because it's the lesser of the two. The sun is bigger, and we kind of go into its orbit. All the little dinky cells, like atoms, they're all swirling around doing all the same thing. And they're all the little dinky little powers. Why is there little ones and big ones? Because it's just all the vibrations. And if you think of vibrations from lower to higher, you just got a one linear line. But we're talking about in all infinite directions. So vibrations aren't from one to the other. They're in all directions. And you're coming and going, positive and negative. And we can't compute. Except that in our mind, we know that the high and the low is infinite. And the only place we can really talk about is the middle. Everything's got to come into the middle and be focused, and that's the source, right? You can't say that the lower is the source of the higher, or the higher is the source of the lower, but maybe you could say that the equilibrium has got 2 extremes, negative and positive, left and right. It's the whole. The whole is the center, or is it the circumference? Oh, this is getting deep. I don't know if you can follow me. But if you can, come on. We're going down this little rabbit hole now. If you think you got lost on that trail, wait till we go down this rabbit hole. So, the sun is a bigger vortex. It's a brighter light. We can see that. We don't know if the earth is a bright light because we ain't got back and looked at it. But the earth should glow too, because we see light on the earth. But are we a source of light? Is the moon a source of light? Is the sun? Well, they say the sun is the only light and we're reflecting its light. But I don't think so. You know how they say that in the Bible, it says we're all called stars. We were the morning stars that sang together at the founding of the world. And many cultures, the Native American and many other, all around the world, they say that when you die, you get a star. You become a star. And you can look up there and see, oh, there's a new star was born. Well, somebody went to heaven, see. But why would the Bible tell us that? Does that make any sense, that we become stars? Some people have thought maybe we go to the planets that are around the stars. But no, it says we are stars. You know what it means? We're lights. We begin to shine as the positive pole. We become positive. We become a creator, a life-giving source. Our Heavenly Father is light. We're His children. But now, there's no light. You don't see light in the blackness of space between Earth and the sun. But you wouldn't, because when the light's going through the air and it reflects off of something. You see that with a mirror and all that. It reflects the image, okay. But why? Why does light not appear out there in the darkness? Well, there's nothing to reflect off of. Or maybe it's an energy vibration that's invisible. And when it reaches a solid, very different vibration, they change. And where that light, which is invisible, hits the solid, which is the lowest part in our little concept, it changes the vibration then from the high down to this lower area where now you can see the burning or the disruption of the lower lamp. Basically, you're charging it. The acid's bubbling. It's getting hot. You've got the hot wire on, and there's a flow of energy through the wire now because it's got a negative and a positive pole. And you notice that there's sparks flying if you touch it. And the element on the heater is beginning to be excited and it's burning. Well, is that burning in the element in the electric stove? Is the burning heat coming from the positive battery cable? No. The heat's coming from the elements and the electrons that's in that element that's being excited and it's vibrating it. And it's vibrating because it's getting a higher vibration from down the line, down the cord, because now there's a flow of vibrations. And this particular vibration is what it is. It's a lower vibration. The other one's a ha, And when the ha hits a why, it makes a disruption. They start doing the dance. It excites them. That's the sex for them. They get all excited and they're allowing some of the light in. They're feeding. It's generation. They're being generated. They're being charged. They're feeding. We have to eat. We have to make love. One's got to come inside the other. There's always got to be two sides to do the dance. So the sun's going to be brighter, but it's not shining to the earth throughout the blackness. It's simply that between the earth and the sun is all these little, we'll call them little switches or little molecules or little wavelengths or whatever. And when they're not charged, they're just lying there. They're not excited and they're not excreting and giving off the energy themselves. They're sleeping. It's off. But when the positive influence of the sun is visible, because at night you don't see the sun. The line or the cord's broken. But in the daytime, you've got this direct line between us and the sun. All the little elements of ether, let's call it. Scientists don't know what that substance of nothing is. Or it's not nothing, it's sleeping. The universe is not nothing. Just hasn't been thought of yet, hasn't been imaged, hasn't been inflated. It's just in a seed form. The possibility's still there, just hasn't been given any energy. So now that the cable's been connected and the sun is risen on the horizon, boop, now the earth starts to vibrate and it's a source of light, just like the sun, because the sun's getting its energy from some other bigger sun or the center of the galaxy or something. We're all getting our energy from the center of the galaxy. We're all getting our energy from Mama and Papa. And we're all little bitty twisters flying off from our mother and father, the tornado. And yes, there is one greater than the tornado called Mr. Galaxy. And beyond that, nobody knows. I dare say probably won't know for a while because this is information that we just can't conceive of at the moment. So that means that the earth is a source and the moon is a source of light, howbeit a smaller voltage. Why then do we see waxing and waning? Well, that's because the line between the moon and the sun is different than the line between the earth and the sun. And so we're at another angle, and when the moon's spinning around the earth, it gets off into a different angle, and the angle of the sun is hitting. We think of that as sun rays. We can think of it that way. It makes perfect sense. But I'm just saying it's not really light traveling. It's just the excited vibration traveling. So the very same thing's happening. It's just that's why the moon is its own light source. And that's why when we're looking square on at it, It's lit up anywhere on there, on that moon, that has any access to the light of the sun. It's going to excite it in the same way. It's going to turn it on like a spotlight, maybe more of a diffused spotlight, a much more diffused spotlight. But it's still a source of light. And I think after we've taken a look at everything I've been saying, what we're really going to have to admit is that probably the universe is neither round nor flat. It is just a concept. And if I tell you that it's a sphere, it's only because there's only one way for me to conceive of it. It's a conception. We're not describing something that exists by virtue of itself without and apart from me. It is part of me. And what I am is a thinker, and it's a concept. And that's me. That's my concept. So the universe, since it's nothing more than a concept, it's not something physical. Physical, what we think of as physical, when we think of it as some kind of reality, by its own virtue, it exists without me. There is no such thing. That's, I forget the idea of it's solid and it's gaseous or fluid. Again, all three of those are concepts. Just like non-existence is a concept. Nothing and something. And as we said, something exists the same way that nothing exists. Both are concepts. The only thing that exists in reality is the me, the will. And yet I am, as a willer, always making these concepts. Therefore, they seem to be part and parcel. The negative and the positive, they go together. I learned from my own vision, my own mind. It's calculation. There's information going one way and more information coming back. And you can take a whole and divide it into all these fractions and make all these variables to infiniteness. So what is the reality? The infiniteness within the whole or the whole itself? I mean, these are such deep questions that what we're really doing by asking the question is understanding the depth of the question. And I guess as the Apostle Paul says, is when you think you know something, you have not yet known it as you ought to know it. So gnosis then isn't something static. Gnosis is questioning. You look at groups like Jehovah's Witnesses that never allowed anyone to question. They never allowed them to think. Well, you might sympathize with people because like maybe back 100, 200, 300 years ago, it was a couple, 1874, 1864 when they started. You can imagine how they felt like since they didn't know, they couldn't understand it. They looked through their books and they were still talking about Newtonian physics. They hadn't even figured out, Einstein had never come along. We hadn't considered quantum physics. They hadn't talked about that kind of thing. I remember when I told my mother one time that deity was everywhere. And she said, "Oh, no, honey, I don't believe that." I'm like, "What do you mean, Mom? It's not a belief. That's what the Bible says." "Oh, no, honey. I believe there's one person called the Lord, right? And this is a person. He's not everywhere. Then he would be a person." I mean, they couldn't wrap their mind around that. And I showed in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, where it says that I am the Lord, and if you are in heaven, I'll be there. And if you're in hell, my hand will lead you. If you're in the depths of the sea, I will be with you. And it's like, what? And then I showed her scriptures in the New Testament. His Spirit is everywhere, and he's almighty and omniscient. He hears everybody's prayer. And I was talking to her about all this, and I could see her little light coming on in my mother's mind, and she knew it. We all know this intrinsically, but she had been brainwashed by Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't want anybody to think about this kind of thing because they couldn't comprehend it, because their mommy and daddy beat their butt so hard and told them they couldn't think for themselves. They had to obey, and they were like little slaves, and they just go out there and cut the corn. That's their job. They ain't got no time for music or creativity or thinking, imagining. What does imagining and thinking do? Does it make for a lot of wicked people running around hurting one another and lies being spun. No, lies happen when there's secrecy and people are conniving and they won't let you think for yourself. Let your flock think for themselves. Don't influence them. Encourage them like your children and say, use your mind. And then we'll get some inventors, and then we'll get some prophets, individuals of powerful minds, which is only somebody who will not so insecure that they stutter. Somebody who's scared to talk to anyone or scared to think, scared to do anything. But of course, they're going to, that's their nature, right? So they're always full of guilt because they were never told that it's okay to be them and to think their own thoughts, that they're good. You're a good person. Everybody's good. The universe is infinite. We've all got all the marbles. We don't got to steal. I am. Ultimately, all we want is to share. We want to love. Everybody wants to. The only reason these people are running around angry and hurtful is because they've been hurt. And people have hurt them and done bad to them. It's an injustice and they don't understand. Confusion. You told them lies because you didn't know, because you were in fear. Let them think for themselves. And in the end, we're going to really have a great world when we have freedom. No more law. And you will notice that you'll enjoy living by your neighbors. They'll come only when you need them because they're like family. They're not annoying. They care about you. And guess what? They're all going to be beautiful. You're not going to find some old 700-pound hick with a shotgun spitting tobacco and you, I don't like that guy. I don't want him around here. No, we'll all be beautiful people in perfection, eating the herbs and living in harmony with all of nature and understanding all the gyros going in every direction that we can't comprehend. All we know is that we're here in the center. Center is just me, the conscious self. And that's the self that I make an image or I focus on. So these little images are the part that we just made up, the little avatar. Will never be the whole because he, the Father, dwelleth in unapproachable light, and I'm always eternally progressing. I'd get so bored if I was in one conscious state forever. I want a little up and down. I want a challenge. I don't want some woman that just says, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, does everything. I was like a little robot. We could just build a robot. I want my equal. I want to talk and share feelings and like, oh, you get it. You understand. I understand you. We think alike. Oh, now wait a minute. I don't agree with that. Oh, and you don't agree with this. Well, let's talk about it. Oh, okay. I see what I see your way you're looking at it. And we start receiving some of their energy and then we have a different perspective. And then we have all these variables and life is just beautiful. But yes, in this illusion of a world of matter, which is, even though it's an illusion, that's a word, even though it's a nothing, it's just as real as the something. Because it's myself as I understand myself at the moment. It's my thoughts. It's what I'm thinking. It's what I'm surrounding myself with, my emotions and what I'm doing, and it's my focus. So it's part of me. It's real only in that it's one variable of me that I'm experiencing right now. All the other variables have to be experienced at the same time. So that's why there's many people, universes galore and beyond infinite. Like musical chairs, we'll just keep going from glory to glory, even as is done by the Lord. And each and every one of these little avatars that we inhabit, we incarnate or transmigrate to, little worlds without end, saith the Lord, are experiences that we create an image. And we image them by negative and positive, by, I don't know. Well, I think I can. I'm scared. Oh, I'll be courageous. All the opposites. I don't know. Well, I'll learn. I'm sad. Well, let's do something, and then we have fun. Get the ups and the downs. You need that. We live on that. So the moon is a source of light. The earth is a source of light. And both the earth and the moon are subject to the sun because the sun is their source. But the moon is a child of the earth, and therefore it's like a grandchild to the sun. And the earth has several siblings we call planets. And this is exactly what everything does, all the cells and humans. And, I saw a really cute thing this morning. I'm just remembering it. My little puppy, the little one, I call him little one. He was just sitting there in the grass looking at me. And I looked over there and I thought, is he looking at me? And he just stood really attentive and his little ears were up and he was just looking pretty much in my direction. I said, I don't know if he's looking at me or something else. Like, why would he be looking at me? Does he want me to do something? Or is he waiting for something or whatever? So I was thinking this for like 30 seconds or so. And then finally I said, well, hello, some little word to him. I spoke to him. And he got this little twitchy going in his tail, and he started wiggling from his tail like a fish all the way up through his body, up to his ears. And he was like, he didn't say a word, but he did this little vibration. And I understood from the vibration exactly what he meant. I'm happy to see you. I love you. Thank you for showing interest. Thank you for saying have a good day. You want to go play? Maybe later? I understood everything. Not from a bark, not from a wink, not from Morse code, but in a sense, I guess it was Morse code because it was his voice. A voice is a vibration, but it's a specific kind. It comes from your larynx, and you can make certain kinds of sounds that in many species communicate. But we don't just communicate with the voice because really it's just vibrations. We can interpret every vibration. We can interpret the voice, which is more clear. We can teach it to speak a language that everybody knows, but it's arbitrary, right? There's different languages. But the vibration of that body, the internal, real vibration, he couldn't lie. He couldn't have said, go suck an egg, because he didn't want to say that. He wanted to say, thank you, I love you. And I read it. It was pure emotion, pure reality. It was his own truth, telepathic. You cannot lie. That's the telepathic communication that we have with animals. And the earth has these vibrations and has telepathic communication with the moon. And men and women have smells, hormones, pheromones. There are certain ways we stand. You see a young man who's nervous, putting his hands in his pocket. We think it's learned behavior, but what it is it's internal. You can't teach the kid to not be nervous when he's nervous. What you can do is give him more experience, feed him this energy till it becomes a part of him and he understands it and he assimilates that experience. And instead of giving him the emotion of fear, you change it, transmute it to a feeling of happiness. Because it's like, I'm afraid I can't have it. And the reaction is shrinkage, turning into some kind of, and then maybe exploding, getting angry, or feeling sorry for myself. Whereas the same thing can happen. And if I don't have fear, but I have confidence, I receive it in its fullness. There's more joy, perhaps. So we got the two extremes. You can react to everything in two different ways. I think that the only thing that separates the two different ways is time and occurrence and learning, growing, assimilating. When you receive energy, you're growing. You water the plants, the sunshine comes down, it pulls up all the elements from the ground, and it builds them like building block, and it somehow forms into these beautiful designs we call flowers and trees, and everything grows in exactly the same way, even little children in the womb. I've often thought of the earth, when I see it, as just a big ball, a fuzz ball of energy, static electricity. I see all the I'm hearing it as a symbol of what it would be doing. I'm not actually hearing it, but I can hear it in my mind in this other symbol. I can imagine, like sometimes when I come into a big city, if there's this big skyscrapers and it's just a boom, it's like a whoom. It's like comes up over the horizon. Well, it doesn't make a noise, but I feel it, a whoom. And so vibrations in another setting might make a noise, but in another setting, it makes a color. And so if you learn, you can interpret not just the larynx. You don't even have to use the larynx. Maybe that's not even what it's for. What do we have a voice box for? We can sing with it. We can pray with our voice. We can have words. That's about the only thing I can think of. I know we eat there and everything, but we make a sound. So I think that's where we articulate some of the details. Because like when I was looking at the dog, I knew he was happy. I knew he wanted to play. I knew he was glad to see me. I knew a lot of things. But I didn't know what game he wanted to play exactly. Now, if I could communicate with my mouth, my voice, I could have said, what do you want to do today, little one? And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. You throw that stick over there and I'll go get it. I didn't get that from him necessarily, but maybe I could have intuited most of it. And perhaps there will come a point when we could do so well with that intuition that we would know and we wouldn't even have to speak. I think maybe higher advanced beings don't even have the voice box. They can just read all the vibrations, like reading the tea leaves. So, is the moon a flat surface because there's no shadows around the full moon? It just looks like a spotlight? No, it's a source of light. That's why it looks like a spotlight. But the source is going to be like a spotlight focused in a different direction at a different angle. And that's why it waxes and wanes, because that side of the moon is turned on with a invisible cable between the moon and the sun. And our Earth has a different cable and therefore a different angle. And I'm seeing only one side of the moon lit up. That's at a different angle than when it's a full moon. And that explains that. As I said, you can clearly see the moon as a sphere when we see the waxing and waning. We see the round backside. And one last little point. We talked about the centrifugal force. Why then does the moon always face us? I believe because of centrifugal force. It's not absolutely perfectly round or perfectly balanced, so that there's one side of the moon that might be a little heavier. Even if it's a little bit heavier. Probably the centrifugal force would pull a pliable round ball. It would be moving back and forth, and it might end up start wobbling and spinning and rotating. But after a certain period of time, when that planet cools to where there's a crust and it's not going to wobble much anymore, there's still going to be a little bit of a push, because we see the high tides and low tides, and maybe even said that the Earth itself bulges when we're at certain places in the rotation, when we're being pulled by another planet. There's these centrifugal forces pulling us. And so at that state, or at the stage that we're in on the Earth and the moon, it's hardened. You don't see volcanic activity. I believe all those craters are not meteorites. Those are volcanoes. We've done videos on that. So there was a time when the moon was active. We still see volcanoes on the Earth. So the Earth is still a little bit active, but obviously not nearly as active as it used to be. And if there was more volcanoes at one time, there was more heat in the air, maybe more ash, caused different climates. All of that is cyclical. But if the Earth was at the stage that it is, which it is, it's got a crust, a good hard crust, and there's not as much volcanic activity, then the bulge would be on the side of the moon that was away from us. And therefore, that bulge being a little bit more mass or heavy would keep, by centrifugal force, that side of the moon always away from us. That's the only explanation, that it could be hung there exactly like that, and we see the exact same face of the moon that we always see. There's no other explanation. It did its centrifugal force. Why then is there gravity all around the Earth and around the moon? Well, we don't know. There's a possibility that there's only gravity on the side of the Earth that's facing the sun. And instead of the Earth being a ball that is, 25,000 miles around, maybe this ball is much bigger. We don't know. There's other models that we could come up with. But it's a big round ball, but we're only getting light on one side. And maybe it's, I don't believe any of this because we've done enough measurements to see. And we've got, over so long of time, we have all these measurements, and we pretty much worked this all out. And everything is working, our seasons, our days, and our eclipses, and all the star movements, and for thousands of years we've been figuring all this out with angles and geometry. Now we've got trigonometry and calculus and whatever else, and I do believe that the science that we've come up with fits what we see. We will have better models in the future where we'll be understanding things as images of the mind or something, or more into the quantum physics, but we're still thinking in terms of physical and particles, and we're still talking about it like that. So in that way of thinking, the way we humans are, this is how we're going to understand it. We're on a sphere. There's no other way to understand the universe but a big sphere. Everything coming from the center. The infinite past and the outward future. But there you go again, getting into some kind of paradox, because if it's the past, it doesn't exist, and the future doesn't exist, and all that exists is this one eternal plane. There you go. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope I didn't confuse you more than you already were. We'll see you tomorrow. May the Lord bless you.